Okeke Adolphus, a billionaire known for his vast empire, sat at a table in one of Lagos's most exclusive restaurants. The clinking of silverware and low hum of chatter surrounded him, but it all felt distant. No amount of wealth, fine dining, or business success could ease the emptiness in his heart. He gazed out of the window, watching the rain pour down on the bustling streets below. It was almost comforting how the weather mirrored the storm inside him. His life, despite all its riches, had been dark and lonely for over 2 decades. 23 years ago, his beloved wife, Cassandra, had died tragically. Ever since, Okeke had been living in a world without color, without joy. He had built an empire, made billions, and become one of the most powerful men in the country, but none of it mattered. The success felt hollow, just a way to numb the pain. Nothing could fill the void Cassandra left behind. He swirled the wine in his glass absent-mindedly, watching the crimson liquid spin, much like his thoughts. Lavish dinners, fancy events, high-profile business deals, they all felt meaningless now. He had no children, at least none that he knew of. Cassandra had always been reluctant to discuss having kids, and back then, Okeke hadn't pushed the matter. Now, it was one of his deepest regrets. What he wouldn't give to have a piece of her still alive. Someone to love and protect. He sighed deeply, paying the bill before standing up and slipping into his expensive wool coat. The restaurant, filled with laughter and conversation, felt like a different world. As Okeke stepped out into the wet, chilly streets, the rain was relentless, cold droplets hitting his face as he walked through Lagos's lively but indifferent streets. Each corner, each street, held memories of happier times with Cassandra. They had explored these same streets together, filled with hope and love for their future. Now it felt like all those memories had been reduced to ghosts and a headstone. Okeke's thoughts wandered to tomorrow. As he did nearly every day, he would visit Cassandra's grave. While Paris would have seemed like the natural resting place for her, since she loved the city, she had chosen Lagos. Okeke never fully understood why, but maybe it was because Lagos represented their shared dream. A new life together, a life that had been cut short far too soon. As he trudged along the rain-soaked sidewalk, something caught his eye. Under the awning of a rundown shop, a young woman sat huddled on the ground, clutching a baby to her chest. Her hair was damp and her clothes clung to her frail body, making her look even more fragile. She looked up briefly, her face marked with exhaustion and worry. The sight stirred something deep inside Oki. He paused, unsure of what to do. He wasn't the type to engage directly with people in need. His charity work had always been from a distance. Donations, foundations, checks written out to causes he believed in, but never face to face. And yet there was something about this woman that made him stop. Maybe it was the way she cradled the baby, with a tenderness that tugged at a long-buried part of him. Slowly, Okeke walked over, his coat dripping from the rain. He stood in front of the young woman for a moment before speaking. "Here," he said, pulling out $350 in cash he had just withdrawn from the ATM. He handed it to her. "Use this to buy food for yourself and your child." The young woman looked up at him, her eyes wide with surprise. For a moment, she didn't speak. Then her lips quivered, and tears filled her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice shaking with emotion. "Thank you so much." Okeke nodded, a strange sense of fulfillment washing over him, though brief. He turned and continued walking, the rain still falling around him. But that night, as he made his way home, something felt different. The usual weight of his solitude had lifted, if only for a little while. The next morning, as he arrived at the cemetery, where he visited Cassandra's grave almost every day, Okeke saw something that stopped him in his tracks. There, kneeling at Cassandra's grave, was the same young woman he had helped the night before, the baby still in her arms. She wasn't begging now. She was weeping softly, staring at the headstone as if she knew the woman buried beneath it. Okeke's heart pounded. Why was she here? What connection could she possibly have with Cassandra? Was this a coincidence, or was there something more to this woman than he first realized? Tentatively he approached. The woman looked up, startled but then relaxed when she recognized him. "I didn't know where else to go," she said quietly. "This place, it feels safe. My mother used to talk about her." "Your mother?" Okeke asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, my mother, Anne," she replied, her eyes still filled with sorrow. She always spoke about a woman named Cassandra, the woman who changed her life. Okeke Adolphus felt a strange connection to the young woman he had helped the night before. He didn't know why, but something about her stirred emotions within him that he hadn't felt in years. As he walked away, the image of the fragile young woman and her baby clung to his thoughts like the rain that fell around him. He couldn't shake it, no matter how hard he tried. It was as though her pain echoed his own, deep, unresolved, and haunting. When he finally reached home, he was exhausted, physically and emotionally. He lay down on his bed, listening to the steady rhythm of the rain tapping against his window. Yet, even the soothing sound couldn't quiet his mind. The sight of the woman and her baby kept replaying over and over. Tomorrow, as always, he would visit Cassandra's grave. It was part of a routine he had never broken in 23 years. Little did he know, this routine was about to take a turn that would change his life forever. The next morning, Okeke followed his usual ritual. He woke early, dressed in his perfectly tailored suit, and prepared for his visit to the cemetery. The gray skies outside matched his somber mood, and the streets were still damp from the previous night's rain. Slipping into his coat, he felt the familiar weight in his chest, an ache that had become a constant companion since Cassandra's death. As Okeke made his way through the bustling city, his thoughts returned to the woman he had seen the night before. He couldn't understand why her image lingered in his mind. Over the years he had encountered many people in need, but something about her had been different. There was a depth in her eyes, a mix of desperation and something more profound, something that tugged at the edges of his memory, though he couldn't quite place it. Upon reaching the cemetery, Okeke walked the familiar path toward Cassandra's grave. The quiet, somber atmosphere of the place always seemed to mirror his feelings, silent, cold, and empty. Normally, he would stand by her grave, talk to her as if she were still there, then leave with the same hollow feeling. But today, something was different. As he approached Cassandra's headstone, he saw someone kneeling beside it. A figure hunched over, cradling a baby in her arms. His heart skipped a beat. It was the same young woman from the night before. Her shoulders were shaking, and it looked like she was crying. Okeke froze, his mind racing. What was she doing here? How could she possibly know about Cassandra? The coincidence was too unsettling. As he cautiously approached her, a wave of confusion and unease washed over him. "Excuse me," Okeke said, his voice low and uncertain. The woman looked up, startled. Her eyes were red and puffy, and she quickly wiped her face with the sleeve of her worn jacket. "I'm sorry," she mumbled, trying to pull herself together. "I didn't mean to intrude." Okeke shook his head, still struggling to process what he was seeing. "You were outside the restaurant yesterday," he said slowly. "I gave you money." The woman nodded, glancing down at the baby in her arms, as if that explained everything. But for Okeke, it didn't. He needed to understand why she was here, at his wife's grave. "What are you doing here?" Okeke asked, his voice firmer now. "How do you know Cassandra?" For a moment, the woman hesitated. She seemed to be weighing whether or not to answer him. Finally, after taking a deep breath, she looked up at him, her eyes filled with a strange combination of sorrow and determination. "Cassandra, she was my mother," she said softly. Okeke felt the world shift beneath him. His breath caught in his throat, and for a moment he thought he might have misheard her. He stared at the young woman, his mind struggling to catch up with what she had just said. "Your mother?" he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "That's impossible. Cassandra never had a child." The woman shook her head, her expression unreadable. "She did," she said quietly. "She had me. She just never told you." Okeke stood frozen, disbelief written across his face. His heart pounded in his chest as her words sank in. Cassandra had never mentioned a child. Never. They had shared so much, and yet this was something entirely new, something hidden. How is that possible?" he asked, his voice barely holding steady. "Why wouldn't she tell me?" Anne looked down at her baby, her voice filled with pain as she spoke. "She had me before she met you. I was given up for adoption. She never told you because, well, I guess she thought it would be easier for everyone if her past stayed in the past." Okeke's mind reeled. Cassandra had always been a mystery in certain ways, but this was beyond anything he could have imagined. He felt a mix of anger, sadness, and an overwhelming sense of loss. He had spent years mourning her, and now this new revelation added a layer of complexity he wasn't prepared for. "I didn't come here to ask for anything," Anne said, breaking the silence. "I just wanted to know who she was. I found out about her a few months ago, and I've been searching for her ever since. I didn't know she had passed." Okeke looked at her, his eyes softening as the gravity of the situation hit him. This woman, this young mother standing in front of him, was Cassandra's daughter, a part of the woman he had loved and lost, and the baby in her arms, his grandchild. For the first time in years, Okeke felt something other than emptiness. He felt a strange, unexpected hope. "Come," he said quietly. "Let's talk. We both have a lot to understand." And for the first time in decades, as they walked away from the grave, Okeke realized that maybe, just maybe, there was still something left in this world to live for. Okeke Adolphus stood there, his mind spinning as Anne shook her head slowly, her eyes filled with a deep empathy. "I don't know why she kept it from you," she said quietly. "I never had the chance to ask her. She passed away when I was still a baby." Okeke's thoughts were scattered, trying to grasp what she was telling him. There had to be more to the story. There had to be an explanation. "Who raised you then?" he asked, his voice a little firmer now. "If Cassandra was your mother, why didn't I know about you?" Anne shifted uncomfortably, her eyes dropping to the ground as if the weight of her answer was too much to bear. "After she died, I was placed with another family. I grew up not knowing anything about my real parents until recently. All I had was a name and a few bits of information I could piece together. I didn't even know where to start looking for you until a few months ago." Okeke's heart ached as her words sunk in. For so many years, he had believed he knew everything about Cassandra. Yet here he was, learning that there were entire chapters of her life he had never even glimpsed. "So you came here, looking for answers?" he asked, still trying to comprehend what this all meant. Anne nodded. "Yes, I wanted to understand who she was. I needed to know why she kept me a secret. And when I found out where she was buried, I knew I had to come." Okeke's gaze drifted to Cassandra's grave, the cold headstone bearing her name, Cassandra Adolphus, etched in stone like a bitter reminder of the life he had lost. For years he had visited this grave, talking to her, trying to make peace with her absence. Now, standing here with her daughter and a baby in her arms, that peace felt shattered, replaced by a confusing storm of emotions. His voice cracked as he finally asked the question that had been swirling in his mind. "And this baby? Is this my grandchild?" Anne looked down at the child she held, a soft smile breaking through her tension. "Yes," she whispered, "his name is Chike." Okeke stared at the small, fragile baby in Anne's arms, his heart swelling with a mix of shock, disbelief, and something unexpected. Hope. Chike was a connection to Cassandra, a life that could have been, a life that had continued on without his knowledge. It was a chance, maybe even a second chance, to be part of something he thought was lost forever. As Okeke tried to process it all, the weight of it threatened to overwhelm him. For years, he had been stuck in the past, mourning Cassandra and the life they never had. But now, standing here, he realized that life hadn't disappeared entirely. It had continued silently, out of sight, and now it was in front of him, waiting for him to claim it. But there was still the sting of betrayal. Why had Cassandra hidden this from him? Why had she made such a monumental decision alone? "I don't understand," Okeke said finally, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Why would she keep you from me? Why go through this alone?" Anne's face softened, but her eyes reflected a deep sadness. "I don't know the details," she said quietly, "but I can imagine. Maybe she thought you wouldn't want the responsibility of a child. Or maybe she believed you were too focused on your business. I don't know, Okeke. I wish I did." Okeke shook his head, the pain of it pressing down on him like a heavy weight. "But she should have given me a choice," he said, his voice strained. "She should have let me decide." "Maybe she was scared," Anne replied, her voice gentle. "Or maybe she thought she was protecting you." The idea that Cassandra had kept such a monumental secret out of fear, or to protect him, left Okeke feeling conflicted. He had always believed they had trusted each other completely, that they were partners in everything. Now he was beginning to see that there were parts of her he had never really known. His eyes met Anne's again, and for the first time he felt a strange connection, not just to Anne, but to the life he never knew existed. The possibilities that had been lost now felt like they could be reclaimed. "What do you want from me?" Okeke asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Anne hesitated for a moment before answering. "I don't want anything from you," she said softly. "I just want to know where I came from, and I think you deserve to know the truth about your wife." Okeke nodded slowly, the weight of her words settling over him. The truth about Cassandra, the truth he had spent so many years without. He didn't know what was going to happen next, but he understood one thing: his life had just been irrevocably changed. There was no going back to the way things were. But perhaps for the first time, that wasn't such a bad thing. He stood there in stunned silence, grappling with the enormity of what Anne had just revealed. Cassandra had a daughter, his daughter, and a grandson he had never known. The betrayal stung, layered with confusion, regret, and a responsibility he hadn't anticipated. Anne and baby Chike were living proof of a past he hadn't been allowed to be part of. But they were here now, standing before him, offering him a chance to embrace this new reality. "I still don't understand," Okeke said quietly, the anger in his voice replaced by sadness. "Cassandra never told me she was pregnant. How could she have kept something like this from me?" Anne looked at him with empathy. "I've asked myself the same question over and over again," she said. "But I never got any answers. She made her choice, whatever her reasons, and it's affected both of us." Okeke nodded, feeling a deep sadness wash over him. Cassandra had always been private, even with him. They had argued about it, how much she kept to herself, but this was on a level he couldn't have imagined. "Do you know anything about her?" he asked, his voice tentative. "Why she did it?" Anne sighed, glancing down at Chike. "I wish I knew more. The people who raised me didn't know much about her either. I've spent the last few months trying to piece everything together, but there are still so many gaps. The only thing I know for sure is that she loved you." Okeke's eyes widened in surprise. "She told you that?" Anne shook her head. "No, but from everything I've found, it's clear. The way she talked about you to people, the way she lived her life, she loved you, even if she kept you in the dark about some things." Okeke clenched his jaw, trying to hold back the flood of emotions. He had spent years trying to come to terms with Cassandra's death, mourning the future they would never have. Now, he wasn't just grieving his wife, he was mourning the life he had never known about, the daughter he had never been given a chance to raise. "And you," Okeke said, his voice strained. "Why now? Why did you decide to find me?" Anne met his gaze, her calmness steadying him. "I didn't find out about Cassandra being my mother until a few months ago. Before that, all I had was her name and a vague story about how I was adopted." When Anne learned the truth about her past, she knew she had to find answers. Standing in front of her mother's grave, her heart felt heavy. Okeke Adolphus, the billionaire businessman, stood beside her, equally shaken. His breath caught in his throat as he glanced at the baby in Anne's arms, now fast asleep. The small rise and fall of the child's chest seemed surreal to Okeke. This was his grandson, Chike, his blood. A continuation of the life he once shared with Cassandra, a life that had been hidden from him for all these years. "His name is Chike," Anne said softly, breaking the silence. Okeke looked at the baby, repeating the name quietly. "Chike." The name felt foreign yet grounding. For so long, Okeke had lived like a man adrift, moving through life without a clear purpose after Cassandra's death. Now, standing here with Anne and Chike, something inside him shifted. His heart swelled with emotions he hadn't felt in years: confusion, regret, and, surprisingly, hope. "I didn't come here to ask for anything," Anne continued, her voice steady but filled with unspoken emotions. "I'm not expecting you to play a role in my life or Chike's. I just needed to know the truth about where I came from, and now I do." Okeke stared at her, feeling a tug deep in his chest. "You're my daughter," he said slowly, the words heavy in his mouth, "and that makes Chike my grandson." Anne looked at him cautiously, unsure of where he was going with this. "I've spent my entire life building something," Okeke continued, his voice soft but determined. "But none of it ever really mattered. Not after Cassandra died. I thought I had lost everything, but now I realize I still have a chance. A chance to be more than just a businessman." Anne blinked, surprise crossing her face. What are you saying? I'm saying that if you'll let me, Okeke replied, his voice trembling slightly. I want to be a part of your life. I've missed so much already, but I don't want to miss any more. Anne stared at him, her face a mixture of hesitation and hope. Okeke could see the uncertainty in her eyes, the fear of letting someone in who she had never known. But there was also a flicker of possibility, a chance for something new. I don't know if it'll be easy, Anne said softly, her voice tinged with doubt. There's a lot we don't know about each other. Okeke nodded, his heart heavy but filled with determination. I know, but I'm willing to try if you are. Anne looked down at Chike, then back at Okeke. Okay, she whispered, her voice barely audible. We can try. For the first time in years, Okeke felt a small spark of warmth in his chest. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough to give him hope that maybe, despite all the pain and loss, there was still something left for him to hold on to. As Okeke walked away from the cemetery that day, his mind was a whirlwind of emotions. The revelation that Cassandra had kept such a monumental secret from him gnawed at him. The thought of Anne and Chike lingered in his mind. His life, once controlled and predictable, had been flipped upside down in the span of a few hours. The city around him bustled with its usual energy, but Okeke moved through it as though in a daze. As much as he wanted to be angry, to feel betrayed by Cassandra, he couldn't ignore the strange sense of responsibility he now felt. Anne was his daughter, and Chike was his grandson. He couldn't just walk away. Back at his penthouse apartment, the rain had begun to fall softly against the windows. Okeke stood in the dim light, staring out at the city. His thoughts returned to Cassandra, her laughter, the way she used to look at him, the dreams they had shared before everything fell apart. He had spent years trying to preserve her memory, to keep her alive in his heart through his grief. But now, with Anne's revelation, he was starting to wonder if he had ever truly known her. Why had she hidden this from him? What had she been thinking during those final months? Okeke moved to his desk, where he kept a small collection of keepsakes from his time with Cassandra. Old photos, letters, and little trinkets that once held meaning for them. He picked up a photo of the two of them from their early days together. They looked so happy, so in love. He couldn't reconcile that version of Cassandra with the woman who had kept something so life-changing from him. Sitting down, Okeke pulled out a worn notebook from the drawer. It was Cassandra's journal, something she had kept on and off throughout their marriage. He had found it after she died, but had never had the heart to read it, afraid it would only deepen his grief. Now, it felt like his only hope of understanding why she had hidden Anne from him. With a deep breath, he opened the journal. The handwriting was familiar, the elegant script that had filled countless notes and letters over the years. He flipped through the pages, reading about mundane things, dinners they had shared, vacations they had taken, but nothing stood out. Then, buried toward the back of the journal, he found it, the entry that changed everything. I don't know what to do. I'm terrified. How could I let this happen after all these years? Okeke would never understand. He's so focused on the business, on our future. I can't be the one to take that away from him. He deserves more than I can give him. I just wish I could tell him, but I know it would destroy him. I can't let him see me like this. I can't let him know. Okeke's heart tightened as he read the words. Cassandra had been scared. Scared of how he would react. Scared of how the pregnancy would affect their lives. But why hadn't she trusted him? The realization hit him hard. Cassandra hadn't kept Anne a secret because she didn't want him to know. She had done it because she thought it was for his own good. She had been trying to protect him in her own way, from the burden of raising a child at a time when their lives were already complicated. Tears welled up in Okeke's eyes. He had spent so many years mourning Cassandra's death, thinking he had lost everything. But now, he realized that he hadn't just lost her. He had lost an entire life he never knew existed. But standing in front of Anne and Chike earlier that day, something had shifted. Okeke knew that he still had a chance. A chance to build a new life, to be the father and grandfather he never thought he'd be. He closed the journal, his resolve firm. There was no going back to the way things had been. But maybe, just maybe, that wasn't a bad thing. Okeke Adolphus sat frozen, the letter in his trembling hands. He reread the words, struggling to make sense of the revelation. Cassandra, his late wife, had been pregnant. She had known and made the painful decision to hide it from him because she thought it was what he wanted. Years ago, when they were young, he had made a passing comment about not wanting children immediately, but he never meant it as a permanent choice. I don't understand, Okeke whispered, barely finding his voice. I never told her I didn't want children. Maybe I said something casually back then, but it wasn't like that. I thought we'd figure it out together. Anne, who stood by quietly, gave him a sympathetic look. I think she was just scared, Okeke. She didn't want to lose you, and she thought this was the only way to keep things as they were. Okeke shook his head, the weight of Cassandra's secret crashing over him like a wave. For years, he had believed they were on the same page. But now, he realized that fear, misunderstanding, and unspoken expectations had silently torn them apart. I didn't know, he said, his voice breaking. If I had known, I would have been there for her. I would have been there for you. His eyes met Anne's, the daughter he never knew he had until now. Anne stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on his arm. I know, she said softly. Maybe she knew that deep down too, but she made the choice she thought was right at the time. And now we're here. Tears welled up in Okeke's eyes as he stared at Anne and then glanced at the baby in her arms, Chike, his grandson. I don't want to waste any more time, he said, his voice steadying with determination. I want to be part of your life, Anne. I want to be there for Chike. I don't care how complicated it is, we'll figure it out. Anne smiled through her own tears and nodded. I want that too. Okeke's stomach tightened. He carefully unfolded the letter Anne handed him, his eyes scanning the familiar handwriting. It was addressed to Cassandra, but the signature at the bottom made his heart stop. It was from Ola, a close friend of Okeke's from many years ago. They had drifted apart over time, but there had been a time when they were inseparable. As Okeke read the letter, his blood ran cold. Cassandra, I don't know if I'll ever have the courage to send this, but I need to put it on paper for my own peace of mind. We've kept this secret for so long, but it's weighing on me. Okeke has no idea about what happened between us. I can't keep pretending. I'm not asking you to tell him. I know it's complicated, but I need you to know I've never stopped thinking about you. If things were different, I would have fought harder for you. I hope you're happy, even if it's not with me. With love, Ola. Okeke's hands trembled as he finished reading. His mind raced. Ola and Cassandra? The idea struck him like a punch. Could there have been something between them that he had never known? Anne watched him carefully, her expression filled with empathy. I didn't want to tell you right away, she said softly. I wasn't sure how you'd take it, but I thought you deserved to know. Okeke couldn't find the words. His heart pounded, the weight of the revelation crashing over him. He had known Ola for years, trusted him, considered him a brother. This letter shattered all of that. He stammered, Are you saying that Ola and Cassandra? Anne nodded slowly. I don't know all the details, but from what I found, it seems like they were involved, at some point. The ground seemed to slip from beneath Okeke. He stood up, pacing the small living room, trying to make sense of it all. He had believed that what he shared with Cassandra had been something pure, something unshakable. But now, this letter called everything into question. Had Cassandra loved Ola? Had she kept this secret because she feared losing Okeke? Or had there been something more, something deeper that he had been blind to? I can't believe this, Okeke muttered, barely above a whisper. I don't even know what to think. Anne stood up and walked over to him, placing a gentle hand on his arm. I know it's hard, Okeke. Believe me, I've been struggling with it too. But I don't think Mom ever meant to hurt you. She was scared, just like she was about so many other things. Okeke swallowed hard, a mixture of anger and sadness boiling inside him. He had spent years grieving Cassandra, mourning their lost life together. Now it seemed that life had been built on lies, on secrets. He looked at Anne, his voice breaking. What do we do with this? How do we move forward? Anne sighed, her eyes full of the same uncertainty Okeke felt. I don't know. I wish I had the answers. But I think it's going to take time. Time to process everything, time to figure out what it all means. Okeke nodded slowly, though his mind was still spinning. He didn't know how to reconcile the love he had for Cassandra with this new truth. But he knew one thing for certain. I don't want to lose you, Anne, he said quietly. Whatever happens, whatever we find out, I don't want this to come between us. Anne's eyes softened as she looked at him. You're not going to lose me, OKK. We're in this together. Her words were a small comfort, but for now, they would have to be enough. Over the next few days, the revelation about Ola consumed OKK. He replayed old memories in his mind, searching for clues, for any hint that Cassandra and Ola had been more than friends. But no matter how much he thought about it, nothing stood out. No suspicion had ever crossed his mind. Finally, OKK made a decision. He needed answers, and the only person who could give them to him was Ola. After some searching, he found Ola's contact information. They hadn't spoken in years, not since they had drifted apart. With his heart pounding, OKK dialed the number. The phone rang a few times before a familiar voice answered. Hello? Ola, OKK said, his voice tight. It's OKK Adolphus. There was a pause. OKK, it's been a long time. It has, OKK agreed, trying to keep his tone calm despite the tension building inside him. We need to talk. It's about Cassandra. There was another pause. Cassandra? What about her? I found a letter, OKK said, his words sharp now. A letter you wrote to her about something that happened between the two of you. I think you know what I'm talking about. Silence hung heavy on the line. Finally, Ola sighed. I didn't think you'd ever find out. OKK's heart tightened. So it's true then? You and Cassandra? It wasn't an affair, OKK, Ola said, his voice low. It was complicated. OKK's anger flared. Complicated? You were my friend, Ola. I trusted you. How could you keep something like this from me? I never wanted to hurt you, OKK, Ola replied. What happened between me and Cassandra was a mistake. It was over long before you two got serious. She chose you. But why didn't you tell me? OKK asked, the betrayal clear in his voice. I didn't want to ruin what you had, Ola said quietly. I thought it was better to keep it in the past. OKK was silent for a long moment, his emotions in turmoil. I don't know if I can forgive you, Ola, but I appreciate you telling me the truth. There was a long pause before Ola spoke again. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. OKK wasn't sure if he was ready to talk more. He wasn't sure if he wanted to know any more painful details about a past that had already cost him so much. For now, he needed time. Time to heal, time to process everything. As the call ended, OKK felt a sense of exhaustion. The truth had been revealed, but it hadn't brought the closure he had hoped for. Instead, it left him feeling more lost than ever. That evening, he sat with Anne, telling her about the conversation. She listened quietly, her face unreadable but full of compassion. I'm not sure what to think anymore, OKK admitted. I thought finding out the truth would help, but now, I just feel lost. Anne nodded, holding Chike close. Maybe the truth isn't always about closure. Maybe it's about understanding the past so we can figure out how to move forward. OKK looked at her, feeling a surge of gratitude. Despite everything, they were still here, together, and maybe that was enough for now.